Welcome to the Humans Outside podcast, where we are building a life around getting outdoors through learning from fascinating outside-minded guests. I'm Amy Bouchatz, a journalist originally from the beach in California, now working to love nature from my home in Alaska. Since September 2017, I've spent at least 20 consecutive minutes outside every single day, no matter the weather. On this show, we hear from others who make heading into nature just a part of who they are while we work to do the same. If you love what we do, you can support Humans Outside on Patreon or leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Ready for the good stuff? Let's go. Well, now I know that when I hit record, people can't change their stuff. So,
life lesson.
Yeah.
Figure it out before.
Learning all the time. Okay. So how I like to do this is I typically read the intro. You know, some people record their intro later. I read it in the beginning just because I think it's nice for the person to hear how I'm introducing them. And then I appreciate that when I'm on a podcast, like, what will they say about me later? We don't know.
What kind of trash are they going to talk about me?
Yeah. Well, like, and it's also like, is it going to be true? You know? So this at least offers the opportunity that if I really dramatically say something wrong, the person can be like, actually, that's not at all the real.
Okay.
So, and then I always, I actually have people turn off their video. So I just feel like it might make the sound recording better.
That is probably true. If I press hide cam, does that do it?
That does the trick. And now you can see where I am and I can see where you are.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it does
they
not
look almost the same.
They do, and mine does not accurately depict the fact that it is like 36 degrees and raining here today.
Oh, so that's unusual. Is it? Like, it seems like
it's weird. Unusual. It's just going to be ice later. Not cool.
Yeah,
I would like this map would be more fun if it had weather patterns on it, but I'll submit that to them later. Right. Anyway, so I will read our little intro and then we'll just get started. And all of this, you know, I didn't send you anything like deep dive ahead of time because it's, you know, just sort of talking about place attachment in your book, which I know you've talked about 100,000 times in addition to writing the book. So,
well, I reread my chapter on nature to give myself a refresher course, but yes, fair. That is great.
Okay, cool. All right, here we go. To say that today's guest had a profound influence on how I've tackled life in Alaska since we moved here sight unseen in 2016 would not be an exaggeration. Melody Warnick's book, This Is Where You Belong, Finding Home Wherever You Are, was published and ended up in my home as a review copy almost at the exact same time we were unpacking the few boxes we moved up here with us. My family and I were used to moving with the Army, but I was dead set on making Alaska home. So hearing advice on just how to do that was exactly what I needed. When I started to work on my Humans Outside project, spending 20 minutes outside every day for a year and seeing what happens when I did that, it was with Melody's book and project as inspiration. I'm really honored that she's taken the time to talk to us here today and can't wait to learn more from her about the role spending time outside has on loving where you live. Melody, welcome to the Humans Outside podcast.
Thanks so much, Amy. I'm really happy to be here.
So we like to start our show imagining ourselves and having a talk in our guest's favorite outdoor space or one of them. So where are we with you today?
We are going to Pandapis Pond, which is an outdoor space. It's probably about a 10-minute drive from my home. And as you might imagine, there is a pond there, about an 8-acre pond. This is part of the Jefferson National Forest system in Southwest Virginia, not far from my home in Blacksburg. And it's also surrounded by a 17-mile trail system. So this was one of my first outdoor places that I came to when I was new here in Virginia, and it has become a little bit of my outdoor home here. It's accessible. It's really lush and green during the summer. The pond is surrounded by rhododendrons, and in the fall, it is just this gorgeous golden explosion. And I just love spending time there. It is my peaceful place.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for bringing us there today. So, talk to us first about the idea behind your book, which was really a project for you after a move as well, just like I read it after my move. And then talk to us about what place attachment is and what it has to do with learning to love the place you call home.
Yeah, so I, like you, maybe even a little less than you, had moved around a bit as an adult. I had grown up in Southern California and never moved a single time till I went to college, was very stable geographically. And then at the end of college, I got married and my husband and I started moving around. So, we moved to Maryland for a job, we moved to Utah for another job, Iowa for grad school. And then we had a brief stint in Austin, Texas for a job. And then finally landed in Blacksburg, Virginia for another job. My husband got hired as a professor at Virginia Tech University. And I kind of hated it here at first. Blacksburg is a town of about 42,000. It's a college town in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Southern Virginia. It is a place that a lot of people really love. But when I was new here, I just felt like I did not belong. And it was kind of this thing where every time I moved, I noticed that some places just felt like home a little faster than other places. There were places where it was easy to settle in, and there were places where it was a little harder to settle in. And this was definitely one of those hard places. And I think partly that was just it. You move to a new place, you don't know anyone, and it's always kind of hard. It's always difficult to find your place in the local society. But in this case, it was also, Southern Appalachian, people had strange accents, and we had not been here very long before I was like, well, that did not work out. We tried
Mhm.
it, it did not work out. We need to move on again. And I knew that that wasn't going to happen. My husband had just started this new job and we had two kids who were at their new elementary school. And I realized that I needed to learn to be at home here. I wasn't sure how long we were going to stay, but I knew that for me to feel happy, I needed to settle in and put down roots. So I've spent most of my career as a freelance writer, and so I'm used to kind of this thing where you have a problem, you're going to talk to an expert about it. You're going to do a little research and figure out how to solve it.
Like I am doing with you today.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. You just call up someone who knows a little more than you do or something. And so that's kind of what I did. One of the great things about being married to professors, you have access to all the academic journals. And so I started, looking through them and trying to figure out, what is it that happens to make people feel like they're happy in their town? What turns a new place into an actual hometown? And I came across this idea of place attachment, which is a term that scientists and psychologists and sociologists use to describe the feeling of being at home in a place. It's kind of the feeling of being in love with the town where you're living, just really feeling deeply connected to it. And I was like, okay, that is it. That's what I need to feel. And then it became a matter of, okay, what do I need to do to feel that? I learned pretty quickly that place attachment is something that sort of slowly develops over time. It tends to peak 3 to 5 years after you move to a new place. But I was in year one and was like, no, I'm not going to wait that long. I'm not going to be miserable this whole time. What can I do to change my feelings about Blacksburg? And that led me to concoct these love where you live experiments, which were, little micro behavior changes that I could make that were designed to make me fall in love with Blacksburg and feel more at home in it.
So, do you are you in love with Blacksburg still? I mean, it's been a while since we've last talked about this.
Yeah. So yes, the spoiler alert, no one has to actually read my book. um, I
Not
have
not
been
so, but we'll get back to that. Keep going.
I have been here 8 years now, and I love it. So, this is the longest place I've lived in my marriage. For my husband, it's his longest place ever. And a couple years ago, we built a house and moved into it, and we're happy here. And that was kind of a new thing. I think, for the first 13 years of our marriage, when we were moving around a lot, there were definitely places that we enjoyed living, but we always felt temporary there. We always knew that no matter how much we liked it, we weren't going to stay. We were definitely going to move on. And this is the first place we've lived where we have the opportunity to stay if we want, jobs and things have aligned to allow us to make that choice. And B, we don't really have interest in moving on. We kind of made this commitment early on that if possible, we wanted to get our daughters through high school here. My husband had a pretty mobile childhood and attended, two different high schools. And we thought, it can be nice for kids if they can stay in the same place. And so that was what we were going for. And we haven't quite achieved it. We haven't, one daughter who's graduated, but we have also an eighth grade daughter. So we have a few years to go till we get her out of school. But as I think about, it used to be my pastime to just kind of fantasize about where am I going to move next? What's the best city? What place is calling my name? Whenever we went on vacation, I would pick up the little real estate guides that they have for free in the gas station, and I would just concoct this fantasy life around, what would it be like to live here? And I do that a lot less now. I won't say that I don't do it at all. I think there's still, some pleasure to be had in just looking at real estate in Indianapolis or whatever, just for fun. But when I think, really, okay, like in 4 or 5 more years, are we going to move? I don't want to, and it's weird. So yes, I am genuinely actually place attached, and the things I did worked.
So I have to go back and defend your book since you're trying to convince people not to read it. Two things. One of the reasons I loved your book, and this is what we talked about when I originally spoke with you back in 2016, is that I do a lot of work with the military community, and I thought that it was just such good advice for military members and their spouses who do have this very mobile lifestyle, whether they necessarily like a place or not, right? You're probably going to move, especially if you do like it. It's just how the world works. You'll definitely leave if you love it.
Right, of course.
But I thought it was such good advice because for a lot of military spouses, it's it's like not necessarily about loving where you live so much as finding the good and making it work while you're there. And that even if you don't end up loving where you live based off of the action and the steps you have in your book, you'll probably end up liking it more than you did to start with.
Right. I think the goal is, yeah, you may not know how long you're going to be in a place. And, realistically, not every place is a great fit for you. Like if
Right.
you're someone
Right.
who loves the outdoors and you love nature and you're in the middle of a huge city, like maybe it's just never going to quite feel super homey to you. One of the pieces of advice in the book that I really loved came from a military spouse. It was my friend Jen Galan, and I talked to her about this because I knew she had a lot of experience moving around. And she said the thing that she tried to do, the motto that she lived by was unpack your suitcase.
Mm,
And of course, that is literal. Like hang your pictures and arrange your space so that it is your space, but also it's this metaphor for, no matter where you are or how long you think you'll be there, settle in, become part of the community, do the work, and it is work sometimes, of trying to belong here.
absolutely. And then the second reason I think everyone should read this is because I think even if you're not a military spouse, it's very, very good advice that you have in there, and again, actionable steps. Can anyone tell that I'm a fan of those? Um, that on how to really hunt for the good in a community, whether it is exactly what fits you or not. on that first glance. And I certainly instituted, even before my outdoor challenge, all of the things that you talked about in there. From finding a place to, you talk about finding sort of that third place to hang out, to volunteering and all of those different kinds of things. And I can honestly say that we love where we live and we love this small town that we live in. Now, would that have been true without trying those things? Maybe. It's basically Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls. I mean, it's just like we
With
have
more snow.
with more snow. And they have the festivals. We have Friday flings on Friday in the summer because, it's Friday. And
Of course.
and 3 parades a year that are basically identical, but just on different dates, and one of them's in the dark. And just, it's just this great little town. And I love the people and I love it. But, I think I accelerated my timeline on that by trying the things you suggested. So thank you very much for those.
Well, thanks, Amy. That is lovely to hear. And I think in some ways it comes down to your desire to
Mm,
fit in here. The fact that you're engaging in this practice of, like you said, looking for the good in your community, trying to find your place in it, making connections and relationships shows that you wanted this for yourself. And so, it does come a little easier, but I think it is a lot of how we feel about our place comes from our behaviors in our place. And so if
mm.
we act like someone who is place attached, someone who loves their community, the feelings tend to follow, even if they weren't there originally.
Absolutely. And I confess to being an optimist sometimes, like often to a fault. So I will like this. Gosh darn it.
I
Anyway,
will make myself like it. But
that's
like
right.
that's, I think that's healthy. You're just fine, Amy.
There are times. Hey humans, did you know you can officially join the Humans Outside 365 Challenge and score some really cool and exclusive challenge swag, including a finisher medal and a decal on humansoutside.com/challenge? You'll also get an outdoor challenge guide written by me for you, an exclusive challenge tracker, and insider info all year long. You don't want to be left out of this. There is never a wrong time to join the Humans Outside 365 Challenge. So get going. Join it today. Go to humansoutside.com/challenge to learn more now. Now, back to the show. So one of the things you talk about this, and this is why this is so pertinent to what we do here on the Humans Outside podcast, is using nature as a way to love where you live. So you tried this. What did that look like specifically for you?
So let me back up a little and say that, when I first came to Blacksburg and was struggling with it and feeling like it didn't really fit me, part of the problem almost immediately was that the nature around here just wasn't my thing. I remember this, day I was at a book club with some girlfriends and someone asked the question, what's your favorite kind of nature? And everyone went around the room, oh, I love the beach. I love the California coastline. I love the mountains. And it was kind of amazing how personal and intimate and almost inexplicable some of those things were. Sometimes it was based on where you had lived as a child, and sometimes it was just it was like a taste you had developed over your life. And my taste in nature ran a little more towards flatlands, towards, grassy plains. I spent 6 years in Iowa, and I really liked that. And when we moved here, we are in the Appalachian Mountains, basically, and so
Mm,
it's not huge mountains like the Rockies, but it's very hilly and very lush and green everywhere you look. And so I remember rolling into town. We had driven through West Virginia. We were coming into Blacksburg. It was July, and I just did not like the look of it. There was something about nature here just how this place and its surrounds looked that wasn't hitting me quite right. I think in the book I described, this feeling of, it was sort of this ominous, Grimm's fairy tale forest lurking everywhere. And that really led to my emotional struggle with the place when I first got here.
Hmm.
And so, as I did with all the Love Where You Live experiments, I kind of, figured out based on research and sometimes based on anecdotes, what are the kinds of things that make people feel place attached. And then I would extrapolate some sort of behavior that I could do to make myself have that experience. So, there is a lot of research that shows that nature is important to place attachment. That obviously there's lots of evidence that spending time in nature is great for your health and your well-being, but that really it is kind of the most elemental way we experience our place is by getting out in its nature. This is your town before people built houses here, or before there was even a town here. This is what it looked like, and it feels really important to love that about your community, to love the kind of nature and the kind of natural beauty that it offers. So for me, coming into this with sort of a bias against it, I knew I had to change that. And the way I did that, the Love Where You Live experiment that I embarked on, was just getting out in it. And we live in a place where the Appalachian Trail runs a few miles from here. Excuse me. The Blue Ridge Parkway is near here. There's a lot of hiking. This is a place where a lot of people come to hike. And so that's what I started doing. Just started taking hikes with friends, with family. One of the first places I went was Pandapas Pond, which I mentioned. But also our local community was sponsoring kind of this enticement for people to get outside called the Scenic Seven, and they highlighted 7 trails locally. And if you hike all 7 trails, you get a T-shirt. So some friends and I decided that we were going to do this, and a few big groups of us would go on hikes with our kids, and there was something about having that experience with other people in
Hmm.
nature that changed my feeling about my the value I was ascribing to this place, that hadn't instantly appealed to me, but now I had created happy memories there. Like, it wasn't just this scary Grimm's fairy tale forest. It was, the place where we had that funny experience walking through the cow patch, or where we waded in the stream. And
Hmm.
so all those experiences in nature created place attachment, and they helped me feel better about my town.
Do you think that the fact that you were moving during those was important, instead of just, like, I don't know, sitting still?
That's a great question, and one that I haven't ever thought about. But yeah, for sure. The fact that you're being active,
Mhm.
that you're doing something really physical, and it's something that feels really positive. I mean, it doesn't always feel positive when you're on the uphill of a huge hike, but it is definitely creating an experiential memory that feels more powerful than just sitting in your house. It's something different from how you spend most of your time. And also the fact that it was social, I think, really helped embed it in
Mhm.
my sense of place. That here's something that I'm doing with other people. So I'm building relationships, which is also a huge factor in place attachment, while I'm building an appreciation for the beauty of my place. And also for what it offers me. One of the kind of an element of place attachment is something called place dependence. And it's this idea that people like places, or feel more deeply attached to them when the thing that they like to do, or the thing that they need to do is reliant on this place. So, you know, in a very basic way, that's like a farmer will have a place dependence for his farm. So his attachment will run really deep. But it's also something like if you're a skier, you might feel a sense of place dependence for the place where you always go skiing.
Mm.
Or if you're a surfer, you'll feel a greater sense of attachment and dependence for, you know, the beach near where you live. And so I think the more time we spend in nature, you know, being physically active, doing something constructive, the more we have a sense of I need this place. I need something like Pantapis Pond so I can do the thing that I like and is enjoyable for me.
So that's really interesting, juxtaposed to what you said earlier about the nature in and around Blacksburg not being the nature that you were drawn to initially. So essentially, like you learned to like this stuff while doing it, and therefore felt an attachment to the place because of the thing that you now liked. Am I accurate in that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, and that's the funny thing is like, I am not a super outdoorsy person, or I wouldn't have ever billed myself that way. I'm not really athletic. Um, but I have kind of trained myself to like this one thing. And it was really an extension of, okay, this is a thing that a lot of people here are into. You know, there's a lot of hiking trails around here. People come from across the country to hike the Appalachian Trail near
Mhm.
here. And if I want to feel connected to my community, I need to make this a part of my life too. I did that with some other things as well. You know, living in a college town, college football and tailgating is a really big thing here. And I totally hate football. You know, couldn't care less. Don't understand it. And yeah, I had this sense that if I wanted to be a true, you know, a true Blacksburg resident, I would kind of need to embrace college football. And so I started, you know, going to a couple football games every season. And I still don't understand it. You know, I'm still confused by what's going on. And yeah, I've learned to love aspects of it. You know, we do this thing in uh, the Hokie football team runs onto the football field to the tune of Enter Sandman. They blast Enter Sandman, and everyone in the stadium jumps up and down. And I can hear Enter Sandman now, and it'll bring tears to my eyes because of, you know, this association with, you know, like these nice experiences that I relate to my community. And so I trained myself in that same way to really enjoy hiking. And I think of it as the thing I do with my really good friends. I have a lot of friends who are into it, and we'll go hiking together in small groups. Some of my best conversations have happened on hikes. And so I I have made myself love it. And as a byproduct, I've loved the nature and the trails that allow me to do that here.
Two things. One, you said you're not outdoorsy, but that sounds outdoorsy to me. And two, big sympathy, empathy, and I hear you on the football theme. You said to be an Blacksburg resident, you have to, embrace the football. To be a resident of my house, you have to do that. And
Oh, yeah.
oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so you're not really allowed to live here unless you are appreciative of the Ohio State University. Um, which I'm
Yeah.
not. So
Right. Well, and you kind of see how you do that in various parts of your life, right? You know,
right.
like there
Yep.
there are things that, you know, maybe I would not naturally gravitate toward, but when you do it long enough, you forget that it wasn't your first impulse to embrace it and you just
So
start
true.
doing it. And yeah, I think as a kid growing up, I was always like, hiking. You know, my family didn't do much of that. So it was always just this thing I felt like I wasn't very good at, or it felt like some monumental thing. And the more I do it now, the more the more I embrace it as part of my identity and part of my place identity
Mm,
too. It's interesting because um, you know, for a long time, even after we moved here, always thought of hiking as something you do with other people. This is a social event. You go with friends, or I would go with my teenage daughter, and I would never go alone. Well, my teenage daughter, i.e. the only one of my daughters who likes to hike, graduated and moved away, and it was kind of like, okay, also we're in a pandemic, so either I'm doing this by myself or I'm never doing it again. And I just this fall really is when I decided that this was something that I was allowed to do alone.
Mm.
And it's taken my love of the outdoors to a new level. I really like the social aspect of hiking. I like getting out there with friends, or with my daughter, and having good conversations. There's something about being, outside that fosters that. But hiking on my own is a totally different experience, and also amazing in its own way of, being able to go to my own pace and appreciate the beauty a little more because I'm moving a little slower, or I can stop. And, it's just, it's been different, but really great.
I'm on record making sweeping and dramatic statements about things I'll never do, and then having to eat my words later. So I should probably stop making those big proclamations that I will never be skiing, or anything like that. That's
Right.
big
Yeah.
mistake, big life mistake. So you talked a little bit about the connection to people that um, builds when you're outside, and then the connection to yourself. So I want to sort of split those things a little bit more. First, the connection to people. I personally find that that's true, that some of my best friends are friends that I've had experiences with outdoors, and I think that's true for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is uh amount of time. Like, you're just
Hmm.
together a lot. um but I'm wondering if I but it also seems a little counterintuitive. So I'm wondering if you think that's true, and if that connection and that building of connection to people surprised you.
Well, you mentioned movement before. You asked whether just the fact of being in motion help create those fond feelings, or help to build place attachment. I think that is particularly healthy for relationships. Like, a piece of parenting advice I've heard is, if you have to have a meaningful, quote unquote, conversation with your child, don't do it staring at each other across a table.
Mhm.
Do it when you're facing the same direction, and ideally when you're in motion. So I found for me, as my daughters get older, that the best place to have a deep conversation is when you're walking or when you're hiking, because there's something about the fact that you're doing an activity together. You're both working in a small way, and you're moving with the same goal, the end of the hike or whatever. There's something about that fosters communication. And
Mhm.
so I don't think it's an accident that when we think about our friends and really great conversations we've had, a lot of those for me have happened outside hiking, or even just like taking a walk in my neighborhood. But particularly being out on a good old-fashioned hike. So I think, time spent together is part of that, but I think there's something about just moving through the space together, and, collectively encountering things that are challenging or unusual in some way. I wrote in the book, I mentioned earlier, this Scenic 7 challenge. And one of the hikes that we were supposed to do was on the Blue Ridge Parkway, which is about a 40-minute drive from my house. So I went out there with a friend. We brought our kids. So together we had 6 kids, who were all, under 12 or so. Um, and we got kind of lost, and it was a weird trail that went through a cow pasture at one point. We were so confused, like, are we really going through this cow pasture? And it started to rain on us. And on paper, it was sort of this disaster of an experience. And yet, the fact that we had a disaster together means it's this great story that you get to tell. And, I think a lot of outdoor experiences are probably at that level, like was not fun in the moment, but it's amazing to remember. And so,
Type 2 fun.
right, exactly. Extra, another level of fun,
Mhm.
fun in the memory. And so I think nature puts us in those situations where that's happening to us, and that fosters community.
Yeah. And then you talked about doing nature now alone. So I'm wondering, are you someone who usually likes to be alone? Is this something that are you a um
I am definitely an
extrovert?
introvert.
Okay.
Yeah, I am someone who likes alone time, and I'm happy to spend time with other people. I'm not like pathological about it or anything, but um, it kind of surprised me doing this alone, because I think I had built it up too much that hiking is an event. It's something you
Mm,
schedule, it's something you invite all your friends. You need to plan for this in advance. You need to pack a lot of stuff. You need to have a backpack with snacks and water, and it is this big deal. And it's recently, just in the past few months or this fall, where I'm like, it's not a big deal. And I usually take a walk every day, but typically, just in my town, in the streets near my house. And this fall, when I had some time to take a walk, I would just drive up to Pandapus Pond, and that was where my walk was.
mm,
And there is a difference between walking in your neighborhood and walking in nature. I think, I have a whole chapter in the book about walking and how valuable that is to place attachment, that when you're new to a place, walking helps you create mental maps that help you feel, it helps you locate yourself in space. Just the simple matter of knowing how to get from point A to point B comes a lot easier when you walk, because you're going at human speed. You're
mm.
moving just a little slower than you do in a car. It helps you notice things. You're observing the houses that are going past, people's yards. You have opportunities for connection, because you're passing people on the street, and all of that is really valuable. But doing it in nature, um, it feels more meditative
Mm,
doing it by myself than doing it with other people. I felt more appreciative of the beauty. It felt healing in a way. This was fall of 2020, when we're, in the depths of COVID and just a lot of chaos and craziness happening. And it felt really good to remove myself from that for a little bit
yeah.
and just have a moment of peace.
You also, if I remember correctly, have a chapter on connecting to the history of where you live. Am I making that up? That's a thing in your book?
It wasn't a whole chapter, it was a section,
Okay.
of a chapter, I
Okay.
think. But
So
yes, I do talk about it.
yeah, so it's I find that spending time outside also connects me to that in a sort of unique way. I have this memory of walking through Prince William Forest National Forest in Virginia, just during a visit, and sort of happening upon a trail and a sign that said something to the effect of George Washington was here. Okay. Um, and thinking like, well, hot dog, if I hadn't come down this little dinky trail, on like this, break during this trip I had, I would have never found this or known it was here. And I have that experience here all the time. If I hadn't walked through this trail, and taken the time to come down here, I would have never seen this piece of history and known this thing. Whether that's just an abandoned cabin or whatever. Right. And there are a lot of those here, by the way. So it's not that unusual. And they may not be that old because things really sort of deteriorate quickly in Alaska. Um,
Wow.
I've in fact, not to rabbit trail too much, but came across this. What I was like, wow, this must be so old, and then I realized, no, it's like deteriorating indoor plumbing, so not that old. But Well, he looked old right then. Anyway, I find that I feel an attachment to where I live because I understand the history in a way I would not understand if I was just to read a book or go to the museum. Do you find that to be true?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the stories I talk about in the book is I talked to a guy in North Carolina who had developed these. He called them "Walk Your City" signs, and they were signs that he put up. He did this in Raleigh, and then made it available to people in other cities that just encouraged people to go places on foot. So the signs would say something like, it's 15 minutes to such and such park, and the idea was just reminding people you actually can get places
Mhm.
on foot.
Yes.
And so as an experiment, I did that here in Blacksburg. I put up a couple signs, and one of the signs that I put up was, it's a 5-minute walk to Westview Cemetery. And it was, kind of this historical place, has some Confederate headstones and things. And I had never been there myself. I was putting up these signs instructing people to walk there and had never done it. And so as I put up the sign, I'm like, okay, the hypocrisy, I can cut it with a knife. So I'm actually going to do this myself. Walked up the street, and went to the cemetery, and wandered through the gravestones, which is, its own interesting kind of experience. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was someplace I never would have stopped in a car. I wouldn't have chosen it as a destination. We are going to the local cemetery to explore it. But when you're on foot, I think there's always this sense of discovery.
Mhm.
Like I get so super excited when I go down a street and I'm like, dude, I did not know this was here, like this cul-de-sac back here. It's amazing to me. I stumbled on a little walking path over at Virginia Tech University, and followed it, kind of going, I'm not sure if this is going to lead anywhere, but I'll see. And it led past another cemetery, that is just randomly on the grounds of the university, but you can't get close to it unless you're on foot. And then wound to this place called Smithfield Plantation. That's one of the original homes that was settled in the area. And again, I wouldn't have chosen these spots as a destination, wouldn't have necessarily been able to get to them if I'd been in a car. But on foot, there's just this sense of, I wonder what's around the corner.
Mm.
And, whether it's a piece of local history or just a bit of nature that you haven't seen before. I love that feeling of wanting to see what's coming next.
Yeah. Can you offer 2 or 3 tips to people who want to increase their place attachment by spending time outside but don't know where to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of every chapter in the book, I actually include, um I'm gonna open it up. So if you hear book noises, that's what's going
Very
on.
on
Uh,
brand.
yeah. I include something that I call a love your city checklist. And these are, speaking of actionable, these are actionable ideas that anyone can do where they live. So here's some of the ideas that I included in the Love Your City checklist that goes along with the chapter about spending time in nature. Make a list of your town's natural assets. So this is sort of an exercise in thinking about what your town, or the area around your town has to offer, whether that's hikes or parks
Mm.
or gardens. Sometimes just looking at Google Maps will help you discover places that you haven't experienced before. Learn the names of the flora and fauna in your area.
Mm.
It really can change dramatically from place to place. And there's something for me about being able to point to a bush and say, that's a rhododendron, that is really empowering. It feels like I know about nature here. That might be spending time with the master naturalists in your area, or just buying a guidebook to plants and animals where you live. But I think having a couple of those in your back pocket, knowing the most common kinds of trees or flowers or whatever, can make you feel more attached. Um, and one thing that I always tell people, especially people who are moving a lot, is find a way to do the thing you love in your new community. And that could be a lot of things, but if you are a person who likes spending time outdoors, as I assume most of your podcast listeners are, figure out where you can do that here, where you are now. So if you like to bike, find the bike paths nearby, or if you like to spend time in water and you just had to leave the beach behind and you're really sad about it, find a river or a lake that can maybe quench that thirst for you
Mm.
in some way. I think too, one thing that I talk about in the book chapter is when people are place attached, studies show that they're more likely to engage in environmentally responsible behaviors, because when you have a place that you love, you want it to last, you want it to look good, you want to take care of it. And so, in the general idea of these love where you live experiments being engage in the behavior, the emotion will follow, I would recommend to people to do some of those eco-friendly behaviors like picking up trash or recycling, or turning off the water, miraculously remembering to bring your reusable shopping bags to the market, because that small effort at showing you value this place and you want it to be okay is a way to build place attachment.
Oh, so good. Such good tips. Thank you so much. So we've gotten to the part of our show where we talk about just some leftovers, just stuff I like to know. So, on the theme of going outside in your hiking adventures and other adventures around Blacksburg, what is you said you don't need all this gear, but maybe talk to us about some gear anyway.
You're like, you must mention gear.
Forget it, because we all know that good snacks or your favorite shoes or something make it just right. So, what is your favorite thing?
So I'm gonna give you like the real geary sort of answer, and then kind of the maybe what will feel like a cop out answer, but is actually probably most important to me. So like a lot of people, I really like hydro flasks. I really love ice, and so having a water bottle that will keep my ice cubes intact adds a lot of enjoyment to my hiking
I don't
experiences.
think that's a cop out.
Yeah. Well, here is the cop out answer.
Okay.
That was like an actual physical item, but the cop out answer is the Libby Library app, or the Overcast app to listen to podcasts. When I started hiking alone more often in the fall, that's what I do. I put in a pair of earbuds and listen to books or podcasts as I hiked, which isn't always great. I would sometimes turn them off just so I could like listen
Sure.
to the sounds, listen to the birds, listen to the leaves crunch under my feet. But if you have, an hour and a half that you've dedicated to hiking, it's really nice to like zoom through a book or so
Yeah,
when you're out there. And
totally
so
agree.
these apps have made it possible.
Also not a cop out.
Okay, thank you.
You're absolved. Um, I'm like
Thank you. I
your
appreciate
outdoor
it.
priest. You're forgiven. It's fine.
Yes.
I will say that I do that too, but I use them. I play them out loud. Which, hot tip for folks: don't do that if there's like a lot of people on the trail, because it can be really annoying. But if
They don't like
you're
that.
no, like nobody wants to listen to your book, okay? But uh, if you're by yourself and the other people on the trail aren't people, they're bears. It's a great way to keep the bears away, is by like you're supposed to make a lot of noise, but that can be really hard to do if you're by yourself. And at some point, you've already sung all the Disney songs ever out loud that you can remember the words to. So now is a great time to let someone else do the talking in a book. So that's
That is a hot tip
what
for
I do.
bear safety.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do depending on where you live.
Yeah.
So there you go. And although I do joke, now we're going to get one of my corny jokes. Okay. I joke that if you want the bears to attack you, you can play Nickelback and they'll attack you to make it stop. There you go.
The bears are like, make it
Yeah.
stop.
That's a free tip. Okay. Free joke. Anyway. All right. Do you have a piece of gear that you consider your most essential that's outside of those two things?
Okay, so once again, I'm gonna do like a physical object and a non-physical object. So my most essential piece of gear is sunglasses, and I don't even have favorites. I buy like cheap $12 sunglasses from Loft usually, but I cannot spend any amount of time outside without sunglasses. So those are a must-have. And then the digital item that I find essential is the All Trails app.
Hmm.
So a couple months ago, I went on a hike with some friends and our kids, and we got totally lost. It was so super weird. It was an in and out trail, we thought, but somewhere on the way back, we veered away and we got lost in the woods. And a friend had this app on her phone, and it saved our bacon by just letting us know that we were headed generally in the right direction. So I
Yeah.
rely on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to know where you are. So there you
Yeah, that that's helpful.
go. Yeah. I'd call that essential. I think you're safe.
Yeah,
All
thanks.
right. Finally, if you would leave us with your favorite outdoor moment ever, if you close your eyes and just picture that ideal moment, where are you and what are you doing?
So one of the things that I didn't write about the book, but was kind of integral to my feeling place attached to nature around here was I volunteer with a camp for teenage girls that's run through my church. You know, 1 week of summer, we spend a week in a old Boy Scout camp in Bastion, Virginia, and I have this memory of, you know, the camp sits on flat land in kind of a bowl of mountains. And one night we had an activity where all the girls, you know, there's like 80 teenagers and adults, we all gathered out in the field, and it was this beautiful night with a full moon rising over the mountains. And we just sat out there and sang songs, you know, with our flashlights. And I think of that as just a beautiful example of what it can feel like when you're spending time in nature in a place that you love or are trying to love, coming to love with people that you enjoy. It feels really pure and holy in a way. And it's just a memory that brings me joy to think about it.
Melody, thank you so much for being on the Humans Outside podcast today. We appreciate you.
Amy, it was such a pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Humans Outside. If you've enjoyed this episode, give us a little love and leave a rating and review to make it easier for others to find the podcast too. What you say matters. It really truly does make a difference. And until next time, we'll see you out there.